what is the narrative that you're talking about right now? And for everybody on this, if we can just go down the line from Faisal onwards, like, what is the narrative that you're saying, and how not to be apologetic about what's happening, but also be really real about the situation? And how are you talking to your founders right now versus what you were talking to them about before?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously it's not easy to raise when sentiment is low, but I mean, again, as I said, I think if we're long-term investors, so if you look with the 10-year view, you'll see basically that, I mean, we have barely, I think 1% or it might be 1.5, 2% of e-commerce penetration in the country. That number definitely is going to be at least 10x of that in 10 years. So it's a massive opportunity, and I actually think it's going to be faster if you look at comparables like India and Malaysia. You'll actually see that they had analog phones or digital phones that were non-smart, and then basically adoption took place where they're sitting at somewhere. I think China is at 60, India is at 30. So in Pakistan's case, we have a significant chunk of the population with the lag effect of adoption that we had with smartphones. You're basically going to have much quicker adoption. And so it might be 20x from here. So that's like a positive way of how you pitch that. Look, at the end of the day, this is not correlated to the traditional economy. I do think brick and mortar is going to deflate. That's part of the overall, at least my thesis, that tech is disrupting the industrial age, similar to the way the industrial age disrupted the agrarian age or the landed class. So now, in terms of how we're navigating the market, look, it's just, I mean, to me, and I hate to be the bearish guy in the room. I was bearish earlier. I'm actually bullish now in Pakistan, but I'm a long-term investor. So my mindset is that when we look back in 16 to 24 months, we would have realized that the bottom of market sentiment in Pakistan was April to July of 2023. So we actually doubled down. We've deployed about roughly around $7 to $8 million this year. About, I think, roughly 50% of that is in new deals. They'll be announced later this year. And there's been a lot of follow-ons. And actually, there's been an entry of some serious investors quietly in Pakistan that understand that when there's, I hate using this word, but when there's blood on the street, that's when you actually go and invest. And I think this is the time to build positions. It's a huge opportunity, 250 million people. The census is underreported, by the way.
Of course,
It's,
yeah. We've been saying 250 million for a while now, so yeah.
Officially, they said 240. I think it's about 250. That's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
And bigger than some of the regional players if you look at Indonesia and Malaysia. So I think, I mean, I'm very bullish, and I think some of the best tech founders were mini India. So if India is going to be rising like a rocket ship, we would, historically, I would have said we're South Korea to China or in the region when China rose. Okay, we might be a Vietnam with some of the setbacks we've had, but it's a massive opportunity. So my 2 cents on that.
No.
The founders, obviously, I'm telling them, hold back, sit tight, do not burn and scale. Nobody's going to reward you for just having a top line with no fundamentals. So you need to basically survive till 2024 Q3. I do think the Fed cuts, but that's highly speculative.
Can I ask you something though? I'm going to say, you used to say 2023 to hold to then. So I'm just going to be your friend
No,
and say.
2024.
So has it always been 2024, and are you extending the timeline, or have you always this
It was
prediction as
Q2
a?
2024.
Okay.
If you look at my original post even in 2022,
Yeah.
I changed it to Q3 2024.
Okay.
The reason is because the Fed actually, they've raised
Right.
significantly, and the market was pricing they cut this year. I personally never thought they would cut into this year, but I thought they'd cut probably by Jan, Feb. It's looking like it might be Q2, but it is an election year.
Yeah.
So I think that we may have a world flush with liquidity by the end of next year.
Yeah, and I say that not to be like a gotcha moment, Faisal, about your post, but also because there's so many things that have been so unpredictable, right, this year that we can figure out. And so thinking about what that timeline looks like. Rabil, do you want to share how you're thinking about things right now?
Yeah, definitely not as smart as Faisal to predict when the recovery is going to be, but the way we think about
Faisal's
it.
my messiah, by the way. Just Faisal, God said this.
It all works until it doesn't.
The way we think about it is the longer term opportunity is still, or the thesis is still very much in play. We're at very low digitization, which is only going to increase. The demographic dividend is going to keep paying. Pakistan is now on the venture radar globally, and we've had a lot of experience of founders building businesses, investors like ourselves going through our first funds and so on. But I think a lot of the reality is also setting in, right? Like Pakistan continues to be, still is a very nascent market. There are some structural challenges. It is difficult to build businesses anywhere in the world, but in Pakistan maybe especially so. Whether we like to admit it or not, there's a dearth of competent and experienced talent. Even what talent there is, we struggle to keep it within the country. And the ecosystem has also seen its shock moments as well. So funding rounds are unpredictable. There's a lot of effects of that which translate into what models can work and what can't. Spending power of consumers and businesses is fairly limited and maybe even declining. And so to come back to your question, what's the narrative from us is, first of all, acknowledge this, right? Because you don't want to lose the trust of LPs from around the world, investors that are looking at Pakistan, and yes, like the longer term play is there. So first acknowledge, and then try to shape and adapt our investing strategy accordingly, right? So what does that mean? That means basically avoid capital intensive, operationally heavy, slim margin businesses. Now we've learned that after having invested in some of them, and that's how you go through these cycles. So that's what we're trying to stick to, which is like longer term play remains valid. Adapt your strategy in the short term, and learn from your mistakes, maybe some of the more broader ecosystems mistakes, and then hopefully be in a better position to continue forward.
So there is no denying the last year or 18 months has been very difficult, and I think that will continue for a few quarters. I'm colored by my rates. In my former life, I was a rates and inflation sales trader, but I think Faisal's said that more eloquently than I can. But what is our narrative to investors during this period? It's one of truth, deconstructing what are the issues that brought us to this crisis, but also what are the positive factors that are paving the way to recovery. And there are. There's been the standby agreement, the IMF. There is a recovery of foreign reserves. There is a yield curve pointing to lowering of rates next year. We have passed the point potentially of peak pessimism, and I think we've seen cycles like this before. Now is actually emerging as a good time to invest. Valuations have corrected. To the founders, the messaging has been very clear from us. Firstly, really great job. Both our portfolio founders and other founders have done a fantastic job of cutting their burn, extending their runway, conserving cash. That was the mantra from last year, and many have done it. And that's been really, really a tough job. We delegate to founders. We can't do what founders do, and they have to make these tough decisions. But my message is, at this point, don't become disenchanted. Funding markets will revive sooner than you think. So focus now on what you can do to orient your companies so that they are in pole position for when that funding comes. For example, have you established a business model that adapts to a longer life cycle? I think people got carried away in thinking that you'll have an exit in 1,000 days. That's just not the case. Do you have a clear, articulable strategy for getting to profitability? Look, funding will come, and it will come when it trickles, it pours. But I think it will be a lot more discerning the next time around.
Thanks for that. What about you, Niall and MGB?
Our narrative has not changed. We're long-term investors. We're in it for the long run. We're here for, like Faisal said, with the 10-year cycle. And in Pakistan, I think if there's something that is sure, is that these downturns will happen, and that you have to navigate through them. This is something that's not in our control, something like the weather. But we've told our founders to keep executing, keep doing what they're doing, and just the way this time came, it will also go. But we understand that in the long run, Pakistan, as we all are in line with, we've seen it. We go through the rough times, and then it gets a lot better. And that's the time that we think that Pakistan will come out on top.
So our experience with the LPs actually has been surprisingly not that bad, and I think one of the reasons is that LPs are allocating this as risk capital, so they're not too concerned about, like what's happening specifically in this month in Pakistan. Really, this is emerging market, frontier market capital. And it's also important to put all these numbers and narratives in context. So yes, funding is down in Pakistan, but it's down everywhere. If you look at H1 of 2023 year over year, India is down 60%, MENA is down 64%, LATAM is down 83%. Now we're very getting close to Pakistan territory if you factor in some of the unannounced stuff. And those numbers for other markets, because those markets have evolved more, that includes debt, that includes large mega rounds, which we hadn't won this year. So that's why Pakistan feels like it's much more down, but I think it's actually not as bad. This is the natural course when you are going through a global market cycle, and that's driving it. It's not Pakistan's macro that's driving it. I think like once the global macro corrects, despite Pakistan's macro, you will see that capital come back. So that's one. Number two, like everybody emphasized, the startup opportunity in Pakistan, it's not as much a function of our macro economy, how fast it grows. If it grows at 6%, it's amazing. If it grows at 3% for the next decade, it's okay. I think that's not going to determine how big the startups get. It's a function of the economy coming online. So when you go from 2% to 20%, that's a 10x in a decade. And I think that's what determines this opportunity. So for our LPs, what we tell them is, look, when we started Fund 1 3.5 years ago, we were asking some big questions. What were those questions? And those were like really, really important questions. Will great founders even build startups in Pakistan? In 2019, that wasn't obvious. We had just one or two, examples to go by. Now we've seen, like many of them have come and done it, and they're building in this very challenging circumstances. The second question was, will they have get access to follow-on capital? And we had 2 years of $350 million in capital. So now we've proven that we will, assuming global conditions are right. And number three was, exits. So now we've answered two of those three questions. The exit question, I think we still need to work on. And that resonates with our LPs. And to founders, it's a very simple message. That economy coming online, if you build a category-winning company, that is a massive outcome, right? Definitely risks have gone higher in this capital-constrained environment, so you have to adapt to that, but don't lose sight of that large vision, and you still have to figure out both growth and profitability. Maybe the order is a bit different now, but you have to really still aim for being a category winner to have that big outcome.